Mars represents force within consciousness. In the Hermetic system described in Poimandres, this is the fifth sphere the soul passes through. At this stage, awareness is no longer only organized by identity, it is now driven by impulse. This is the layer where action begins to feel immediate and necessary. Not because it is chosen, but because it feels like it must happen. Mars introduces momentum, a push, a pressure within experience that moves thought into action without pause. In simple terms, this is reaction. Something occurs, and response follows instantly. There is no space between stimulus and action. Before this stage, you may have thoughts, desires, and identity. After this stage, those elements begin to act automatically. Desire becomes pursuit. Thought becomes decision. Identity becomes defense. The martial sphere converts internal experience into external movement. It governs aggression, but not only in the sense of violence. Aggression, in this context, means forward force, the need to act, the need to respond, the need to assert. This can appear as anger, it can appear as urgency, it can appear as the inability to remain still when something arises. But all of these are expressions of the same structure, impulse without examination. In the Hermetic ascent, this layer is described as rashness or audacity. This does not refer only to bold behavior. It refers to action that occurs without awareness of its origin. A simple example. Someone speaks and irritation appears. Before observation, a reaction follows. Words are spoken, tone changes, behavior shifts. The reaction feels justified, but it was not chosen, it was triggered. This is the function of Mars. It binds awareness to action. It removes the space where recognition could occur. Another example. A desire appears. Immediately, action follows to fulfill it. There is no pause to question the desire, no separation between urge and movement. This is not decision, it is momentum. The key distortion of the martial sphere is not force itself. Force is neutral. The distortion is unconscious action. Action that feels necessary, but is actually conditioned. Action that feels personal, but is actually automatic. In everyday life, this is often mistaken for personality. I am reactive. I am decisive. I act quickly. But these are descriptions of patterns, not identity. They are expressions of the martial garment. If you observe closely, impulse always has a beginning. It arises, it builds, then it moves. But most of the time, only the movement is noticed. The beginning is missed. The Hermetic teaching points to this gap, not to suppress action, but to see its origin. Because once the origin is seen, the compulsion weakens. And once compulsion weakens, action becomes optional. The goal is not passivity, it is clarity. Action can still occur, but it is no longer driven by unconscious force. In the ascent described in Poimandres, the soul returns this garment. It releases rashness. It releases automatic reaction. It releases the need to act without awareness. What remains is movement without compulsion, action without force driving it, response without reactivity. This is the core teaching of the martial sphere. Impulse is experienced. but it is not what you are. When this is seen clearly, a space begins to appear between stimulus and response, between urge and action, between pressure and movement. That space is the beginning of freedom from this sphere. You have seen how impulse forms, how experience moves into action without pause, how reaction feels immediate and necessary. Mars does not create action. It removes the space before action. In the lesson, you observed that reaction is not chosen. It is triggered. It arises, builds, and moves. Now you will no longer analyze this process. You will observe it directly. Let attention settle. Not inward, not outward, but present. Notice any subtle pressure within experience, a pull to respond, a need to adjust, a movement beginning to form. Do not act on it. Do not suppress it. Simply observe the impulse before it becomes action. This is the point that is usually missed, the moment before movement. Stay here. As sensation arises, do not react. As thought appears, do not follow. As pressure builds, do not release it through action. There is no control here, only observation. Impulse is allowed to exist without becoming behavior. You begin to sense a separation between the urge and the movement that normally follows. That separation is the opening. You are not the reaction. You are not the force that pushes action forward. You are what remains when action is not immediately taken. Now remain here, at the edge of movement, without crossing into it. The martial sphere weakens, not through resistance, but through non-participation. Impulse continues, but it no longer controls action. You are now ready to enter direct release, where force is experienced without becoming movement. Allow the body to remain still, not held still, but unmoved by instruction. There is nothing to act on, nothing to respond to, nothing to complete. Bring attention to experience as it is, not to any object, but to the field in which movement begins. Now notice a subtle pressure, a forming urge, a movement that has not yet become action. Do not follow it. Do not resist it. Remain before the movement completes. This is the martial current, the force that turns experience into action. It does not ask, it pushes. And what it pushes, it becomes. Now allow an impulse to arise naturally. Do not create it. Do not search for it. Wait. When it appears, observe the beginning. The first moment of pressure. The first signal of movement. Stay there. Do not cross into action. The urge builds. The body prepares. Thought begins to justify movement. Do nothing. Let the impulse exist without completion. This is where the pattern breaks. Normally, impulse becomes action. Now, impulse remains as impulse. Without movement, the force has nowhere to go. Feel this clearly. The pressure exists, but it is not controlling you. The urge is present, but action is not required. You are not the movement. Now observe what happens. Without action, the impulse begins to change. It weakens. It loses direction. It dissolves. This reveals the structure. Impulse is temporary. It depends on completion to sustain itself. Without completion, it ends. Now the return begins. All reactive force, all automatic movement, all pressure to act without awareness is released, returned to the sphere of Mars, where force belongs. You remain, without compulsion, without urgency, without the need to respond. Action may still occur, but it no longer begins from pressure. There is space now, between stimulus and response. Remain here, where movement is optional, where force no longer drives action. The garment of impulse is returned. Reaction is dissolved. Force no longer binds awareness. There is nothing to act on, nothing to resolve, nothing to push forward. Only awareness, without compulsion. Rest here, where action no longer begins without you.